Nathaniel Hawthorne, renowned author in the genre of dark romance, wrote many popular short stories during his lifetime, but his most influential work, The Scarlet Letter, would become a classic in the history of literature and college essays everywhere. In this tale of guilt and sin, a woman branded with the shame of adultery proves that her morals are stronger than the Puritan society that condemns her, and the story is widely hailed for its early feminist ideals. Nathaniel Hawthorne was born in 1804 in Salem, Massachusetts, to the senior Nathaniel Hawthorne and Elizabeth Clark Manning. The author was descended on his father's side from John Hawthorne, a judge who was instrumental in providing vague evidence against many innocent people during the Salem witch trials, and the only judge to never repent for his actions. Nathaniel would later add the W to Hawthorne in an effort to distance himself from his ancestor, proving that he always had a fondness for the power of letters. The New England area, one of the earliest American settlements, hides a dark past beneath its colonial architecture. The infamous horror author H.P. Lovecraft set most of his stories in the haunted fictional location of Arkham, Massachusetts, seat of the Miskatonic University. But many authors have felt the dread pull of New England, and Hawthorne was no exception. The macabre history of New England was baptized in fire, when several people were burned at the stake or hung from accusations of witchcraft. The Salem witch trials, which took place between February 1692 and May 1693, resulted in the executions of 20 people, most of them women. Fleeing nearby colonies that had been destroyed by Native American attacks, migrants poured into the Salem district and, mixed with the already potent brew of superstition and religious oppression, created what was described as a quarrelsome population. 12 women had previously been executed for witchcraft before the trials had even begun. Massachusetts' government was dominated by conservative Puritan leaders, whose ancestors had settled the area with the intent of establishing a society based on their religious beliefs. Raised in this insulated and secular environment, the children of local mason John Goodwin were supposedly tempted by the devil to steal the linens of an old woman named Mary Glover, who was then said to have cursed them with a strange ailment, dubbed the disease of the astonishment. The symptoms of the strange disease included hallucinations, seizures, and violent outbursts. In truth, the odd symptoms were actually the result of a foodborne intoxication, a fungal blight that was ingested from nearby crops. But the damage was done, and the mass hysteria that ensued is one of the darker moments in American history. Inspired by these dark events, or rather, repulsed by them, Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing is steeped in the style of dark romanticism, a literary subgenre that focused on the fallibility of man and personal torment brought on by guilt and sin. The dark romantic writers, such as Edgar Allan Poe, conjured demons, ghosts, vampires, and other sordid ghouls as physical representations of the evil that resided in man. Poe had a somewhat intense rivalry with Hawthorne, though admitted that, quote, "The style of Hawthorne is purity itself. His tone is singularly effective, mild, plaintive, thoughtful, and in full accordance with his themes. We look upon him as one of the few men of indisputable genius to whom our country has as yet given birth." Quite the praise from a man who accused Hawthorne of plagiarism, but Poe certainly recognized the dark heart that beat beneath the floorboards of Hawthorne's books, which became most apparent in his seminal 1950 work of historical fiction, The Scarlet Letter. In The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne created such a clever facsimile of 1692 Boston that critics have proclaimed his work historical fiction. Hawthorne managed to capture the dark, oppressive spirit of the times, of a village buckled under the tyranny of puritanical rule. I could give you an in-depth synopsis of the story, but I'll allow Emma Stone to sum it up for you, as she did in her 2010 movie, Easy A modern-day retelling of the classic.
For those of you who haven't read The Scarlet Letter, or for those of you who said you did but really didn't, here's all you need to know. This girl named Hester Prynne has an affair with the minister, is besmirched and made to wear a red A for adulterer. But then the town realizes she was too harshly judged, and she's really a good person, and she dies a saint. A whole bunch of other stuff happens too. If you have a test on it, rent the movie, but make sure it's the original. Not the Demi Moore version where she talks in a fake British accent and takes a lot of baths. To say that one was freely adapted is a bit of an understatement, Governor.
It is unclear from which ineffable witch's forest Hawthorne conjured Hester Prynne up from. Hester Prynne is a woman who owns her womanhood, indeed reclaims it from the society that wished to brand it as an evil sigil. She has taken their derision, their oppression, and their scorn and transformed it, alchemically as Hester does through embroidery, into the purest of gold, that which is self-reliance and respectability.
Yours is the blame. If you were an honest, God-fearing woman and brought your child up in a proper manner, this would never happen.
Say what you will about me. I can tolerate your insults, but lay not a hand on my child or you will rue it.
One must be lost first to be found. As Hawthorne echoes, with nothing now to lose in the sight of mankind and with no hope and seemingly no wish of gaining anything, it could only be a general regard for virtue that had brought back the poor wanderer to its path.
No, 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 she's mine. God gave her to me in place of all the things he's taken from me. She's my happiness and my punishment, too. You cannot take her.
To this day, Hester Prynne remains one of the most memorable characters in fiction, a symbol of unwavering moral courage. In most depictions of the character, she is seen cradling her child born out of love, Pearl, reminiscent of the Virgin Mary. This imagery appears again and again, and in the conclusion to the 1934 movie, she holds the fallen minister before the crowd of onlookers, cradling him as Mary once did to the newborn Christ.
People reverence you. Does that bring you no comfort?
More misery. And I look inward and see the black reality of what they idolize. I would their reverence would turn to scorn and to hatred. No, now I stand where I should have stood 5 years ago. By your side.
Hester traversed the gloomy paths of exile from a society that had no viable place for women except as to quite literally be put on a pedestal to shame, and emerged not a pure being, not the sole inheritor of God's good grace, but one of equal standing with those around her. It is not Hester's quest to rise above her station in life and join places with her fellow man. She has already been placed above them at the very beginning of the story. Critics also detect a hint of feminism in his long, protracted prose, as exemplified in this passage. As a first step, the whole system of society is to be torn down and built up anew. Then the very nature of the opposite sex, or its long hereditary habit, which has become like nature, is to be essentially modified before women can be allowed to assume what seems a fair and suitable position. It is the minister himself, Arthur Dimmesdale, who must seek to rise to Hester's level by story's end. As their shared tombstone implies in the conclusion, they have together grasped the banner of equality, and with the final challenge, etched it in immortal stone, daring the world to take it back. Nathaniel Hawthorne may not have set out to write a feminist story, but his novel wears it like a proud brand nonetheless.